The Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Techtown Detroit is a business incubator and accelerator, helping tech startups and local businesses launch and grow. Techtown supports businesses with co-working, office, meeting, and event space. They also connect entrepreneurs to resources and learning and networking events in Detroit. Techtown Detroit, Detroit's entrepreneurship hub. Hey everybody, welcome to the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig Fahle. As you can see, we have a full house here this week to talk about all the different stuff that is going on, and this is a historic week in this country as we go through impeachment proceedings and a lot of other stuff that is happening here. Joel Sklar is back once again.
Good morning.
Thank you, sir, for being here.
Great to be
Steve
here.
Steve Fishman back once again. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. A couple of attorneys. We needed some attorneys here on the program today to sort of dissect some of the arguments being made. Alan Lengel, of course, the editor here at Deadline Detroit and co-founder of Deadline, is with us as well. Nancy is out today. She will likely be back next week. At least we hope so, because she is the eye candy we are lacking today, as she likes to call herself. So that is not my turn.
Right, you clarify that.
Yeah, very much. Well, she says
it.
she likes to occupy what she calls the bimbo chair, which is now Steve Fishman's chair today. So
the 70-year-old.
But
The Alta Cocker chair.
That's it. But, gentlemen, I don't want to start with the impeachment thing today because something that has been plaguing our country in recent years is a number of mass shootings. We had another one yesterday in Santa Clarita, California. It was like the third story on the news yesterday, and obviously impeachment's a big deal. But these things are getting glossed over. I was in the convenience store in the lobby of the building yesterday, and I walked in and CNN was on, and I saw some, they had some police on the screen, and I said, "What's going on?" And one of the other customers goes, "Another school shooting." And just sort of like the fact that these things are just sort of being glossed over now. We are becoming numb to this kind of stuff. And it got me thinking yesterday a little bit about the Supreme Court decision just last week or earlier this week to not hear Remington's appeal to them to dismiss this case against them. There's a weird sort of angle that the Sandy Hook parents are taking on this, accusing Remington of marketing a military-style weapon to civilians. That is the angle they're taking. The Supreme Court, with no comment, said, we're not going to hear that. Kicked it back down to the lower courts, which have ruled against Remington and are going to allow this to go forward. Now, is this the first kink in the armor of the gun lobby? Because this 2005 law shielding them from a lot of prosecution for misuse of their product or use in crimes has kept them out of a lot of legal trouble. There used to be a lot of firms here in town and elsewhere around the country that dealt with these product liability cases for the gun companies. They haven't had to deal with that in 15 years now. This is a significant shift, and I've got a couple of attorneys here. I'd like to get your thoughts on what the Supreme Court did.
Well, listen, I'm thrilled that they did what they did. It's about time we hold those who create the weapons that are killing our children somewhat liable. Again, assault rifles are for the military. Assault rifles are to protect the country. Assault rifles are not for individuals. They're not for my neighbor. They're not for the kid that goes to school. These are instruments of death, and thank God that Remington will be on the hook. Perhaps the threat of losing money will finally cow these companies and these manufacturers to do the right thing and become socially responsible citizens of this country, because what's happening is horrific. My son is 24, not that far removed from college, and it absolutely terrifies me that he could. Again, it terrifies me that he could be fall victim to some madman or mad kid with a gun, because there's so many out there. And so I'm thrilled that Remington will be liable.
Well, the fact that they had this broad, basically they were free from any sort of legal action for a long, long time. It's the only product I know of that has this type of legal protection, but it's also the only product I know of that is actually mentioned in the Constitution. There's nothing about automobiles in the Constitution.
True.
But car companies couldn't get away with this kind of stuff. If people were dying in the numbers in car accidents, they've had to make adjustments to their product all along to increase safety. They get sued constantly. There's recalls. There's all these sorts of things. And I'm wondering, potentially, if you're looking at this, you've got 20-something families in the Sandy Hook case alone. There have been a number. If this goes forward, there's going to be a lot more lawsuits against these companies. If this one wins, this could be the tobacco settlement.
Yeah, it's a watershed. Absolutely.
Am I misinterpreting this, or could it be that big?
Personally, I think that the biggest success that the NRA ever had was the passing of that statute, because the only way you ever get change around here, it's not like somebody gets religion, although you got to give Dick's Sporting Goods a little credit in Walmart and that kind of stuff. But money, that's how you do it. And lawyers like Joel, it's not going to be the only case. It's going to be argued based on the theory that they use there. They see
Correct.
that it's accepted by the trial judge. It's not overruled by the appellate courts, and good plaintiffs' lawyers they know how to couch the language that they'll use. And if you hit them in the pocketbook, it would be amazing how suddenly I guess maybe we really don't need AR-15s and AK-47s to sell to 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds.
Which is exactly the reason why we have civil suits, right? I mean, what is it, with Ralph Nader and No Car, whatever, Safe at Any Speed.
Unsafe at Any Speed.
Correct. And all of this type of litigation is very righteous litigation because it has a significant social policy. And I agree. Plaintiffs' lawyers are going to adopt these theories, are going to pursue those theories, and the threat of losing millions or billions is going to hopefully make companies remedy what they've been doing.
I was going to say, just in the very beginning, we're talking about being numb. It's like now we look at it and we say, oh, only 2 people were killed, It's like, that's not, well, we should be horrified that somebody came into a school and started, shooting people. Now we're just like, how many, it has to be numbers now. It has to be, it's like the Las Vegas shooting, where there were just mass numbers. And then we react for a drop. But I think one of the breaking points, the Sandy Hook people, when I thought back then, okay, elementary school kids are being murdered.
Sure,
this
right.
is going to turn a dime here, and it didn't. And I think maybe in the end, it is money, and not lives.
It's a sad commentary, but it's
not
true.
lives. It's going to be money.
Yeah, I agree absolutely. It's the pocketbook.
But it was seeing these kids walk out of that school. Yesterday on CNN, I'm watching it. It's just the horror that each of these are 14, 15, 16-year-old kids going through. It's my God. It's absolutely terrifying.
Well, I wanted to get to this, too, because all things lead to Trump eventually on this one. But William Barr, the Attorney General, of course, yesterday came out and they said, hey, how come Congress isn't doing anything? There's been some laws passed in the House that would increase background checks. The Senate has been working on a negotiated bipartisan plan for this one. William Barr said Wednesday that efforts in Washington to pass this are being derailed because of the Democrats and the impeachment proceedings in Congress. And I thought to myself, all right,
wow.
that's a pretty awful statement to make right there. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. And last I checked, the Senate is not dealing with this issue quite yet. Right. The House is dealing with it right now. And if they're saying that the president can't focus, then maybe that's an argument that he's not fit for the freaking job, because you've got really important stuff going on. You've got bipartisan support for increasing background checks, something the president has said he wanted, and they still can't get it done. They haven't been able to get anything done on this issue for a long time.
He doesn't want it. I mean, what
the
he
NRA
says,
called him, remember,
what
he backed off.
What he says one day, he comes out one day, right when things are happening and people are outraged, he'll say, yes, we need to do this, we need to do that, and then 2 days later, NRA calls, and he's like, well, it's a slippery slope. We have to be careful.
Guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Yeah, right.
Or a good guy with a gun.
People with guns kill people.
Right.
I've noticed that. And people with guns like these can kill a lot more people a lot more quickly.
Your original question about Barr, it's a dishonest statement. He knows it when he says it. It's a dishonest statement. Not just that people can walk and whistle at the same time, but the fact of the matter is that the House has passed any number of things since the Democrats took over the House, and McConnell won't even give it a hearing. They don't even vote on it. So who is he kidding? It has nothing to do with impeachment. It has to do with the fact the Republicans don't want to do anything about anything.
And certainly about gun control. The allegiance to the NRA that the Republican Party has and this president has, I think you really can't question. It is his loyalty is to that constituency and not to the country as a whole.
The NRA, and I've said this before, the NRA helps determine who heads up ATF and who gets confirmed by an agency that is supposed to be enforcing the current gun laws. And now the latest nominee for ATF is apparently not tough enough or not pro-gun enough. So NRA is getting involved in blocking him. The previous person, again, was not, was a career person and who was blocked from confirmation there. So the NRA, that's one thing. We should really be focusing on the influence they have.
Well, we shall see.
On this issue, the NRA has done everything to make it easier.
Let me ask you this, though.
To get a gun.
If a bill was passed, would this president even sign it? Honestly, would this guy sign a bill that restricted any gun sales, any distributions? I don't see that happening.
We're talking
Not
just
if the
like
NRA
background
calls.
checks, potentially.
Any
Expanding
restriction.
background checks to get rid of the loopholes that exist there. And one of the arguments against this background check bill was like, well, this could disrupt my ability to loan my gun to my grandchild. This woman said this yesterday.
So when he goes to school,
Right.
yeah,
right.
I
Here's
got
the
it.
AK-47. You forgot your peanut butter and jelly.
Hey,
He's in
strap
fourth
this thing on.
grade.
Here's some ammo.
All right, let's move on. We do got to get to impeachment. This is, of course, these hearings are going on today. They're going to be going on this weekend as well. We have the testimony from the former ambassador to Ukraine, Yovanovitch, that was going on this morning. She was pretty compelling in talking about what's going on and really sort of defining the role that Rudy Giuliani has played throughout this whole thing. So when the president's talking about, well, read the transcript, they seem to be trying to make this only about that phone call instead of all the other crap that has led up to this. All this whole pressure campaign to get rid of somebody they didn't like who recognized what was going on. Rudy Giuliani and Lev Parnas and these guys were doing some really shady stuff over there, undermining the ambassador, the appointed ambassador, about what was going on and finding a way to get her out and working with the old corrupt prosecutor to see if they could force him to look into these phony allegations.
Who Mr. Trump referred to in the phone call as a fine fellow.
Exactly.
Fine guy,
The
doing
that
a fine job.
Every Western government wanted gone.
Right.
If you put all this with Hillary Clinton doing all this, oh my gosh, the GOP would
go
just
insane.
go ballistics.
I think Trump's the only person in the world who survives these things. I can't imagine anybody else, I don't care Republican or Democrat, any other name. There's some, again, it's a cult of personality with this gentleman.
He gets it when he said when he can,
shoot a guy on Fifth Avenue.
shoot a gun down on
Right.
Fifth Avenue. He understands his appeal. He understands how to hoodwink people. And
Absolutely.
he's done a phenomenal job. I mean, as a propagandist, he's the best.
Unparalleled.
Well, he's had a lot of practice. Remember, as I've said on the other couple times, this is a career criminal. This is not a regular person. And I've said this over and over again. People make a mistake when they try to compare him to a regular person. There's the regular brain. There's the criminal brain. That's his brain.
Tweeting out during her testimony, he
Right.
sent a tweet saying, "Everywhere she goes, things go to hell." Bringing up Somalia, which of course is the most lawless place in the world.
Here's the thing to me, and I watched a decent amount of Ambassador Taylor and of Mr. Kent,
watched everything
and
on
also of this ambassador. The thing that's overwhelming to me, and you have to hope, not for the 30% that he could go ahead and shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, but you have to hope that people who are watching, maybe not watching every minute of it, but seeing the excerpts on the news, are recognizing this is a string of people who've devoted their entire life to working for this country, not to make money, not to go out and self-promote themselves. They've devoted their entire life to this. And these Republicans, most of whom never served in the military, it's one of my favorites is when they're trying to pick on Ambassador Taylor, right? 5th in his class at West Point, by the way. But these, to me, people who are not the diehards, if you're watching this and you realize what they're trying to do to the type of people they're trying to do it to, the needle, in my view, maybe I'm wildly optimistic, the needle is moving.
I hope so.
I think the needle is moving. I think, and I can't wait to see, and once we get done with this, I'm turning my Washington Post computer thing back on. I want to see these men, the Jim Jordans of the world. These guys are 1950s. They're madmen. They talk about females like people talked about them in the 50s. I want to see these guys, the guy from Texas, Radcliffe, I want to see them, quote, cross-examining Ambassador Yovanovitch. If they had any brains, all of them would shut up and they'd let that one woman from New York, even though she's full of crap too, but at least she's female.
Point of parliamentary procedure.
She's horrific.
But the
one
point
a lot.
is, you're going to see stuff, I guarantee it, you're going to see stuff this afternoon coming out of these guys' mouths. I don't think the lawyer's stupid enough to do it, but maybe he might.
There were some
I
bad
don't know.
questions yesterday.
The lawyer was hysterical
Wednesday, I was
when he
pretty rough.
says it could have been.
Worse.
Okay, but let me just
Could he have
throw
done
this
something else?
Let me
that was
throw-
more
Let me
outlandish.
throw
You know,
this
please.
in as somebody who obviously, as a criminal defense lawyer, you get put in a position where you're representing the unrepresentable, the things that have gone on. You get stuck in a trial. Sometimes the guy did it. And you're just trying to give him a fair shot, okay? I kind of empathize with Castor when he asked that kind of a question, because if you think about it, what else can he ask Taylor? What's he going to do? Try to impugn the man's integrity? What's he going to say to Cantu? Generations of service? One guy got a purple. I mean, they're all of them. So he's kind of stuck to try to figure out something. And I thought that Taylor's response, military man that he was, just the fact that he kind of looked at him, And what? I guess
Could have been worse. Could it have been worse?
Yeah,
Could that massacre have been worse?
You know,
well,
everybody could have died. You know, I mean,
it's been really, really interesting to watch this so far. But the thing that's interesting to me is that when I watch the sort of the post-testimony reaction to this, and you listen to people like Devin Nunes and everybody else who's involved in this, and they're trying to say, well, look, this is all being done in secret. This is an unfair. He's not getting his due process, Sixth Amendment rights. That's why another reason I wanted to have you. That does not come into play yet. That comes into play in the trial in the Senate. Correct.
One guy said it the best when he said, "We want the person who started it all." Yeah. I don't know who it was who said it. One of the Democrats said, "Really?
Vermont.
We want him too.
Right.
Bring him in.
The president.
Bring Trump and let him testify."
The Sixth Amendment. You're exactly right. What Devin Nunes couldn't spell cat if you spotted him the C and the A. Okay, so we're not talking about a guy who has a brain.
That would be a D at the end of it for him. By the way.
What they're completely missing is all of these rights that they're talking about. We do have them. You know when we have them? When we're charged with a goddamn crime.
Right.
That's when we have them.
And that's what they're figuring out right now is whether to bring a charge.
Right. No, but even then it's not a crime. Criminally, that's when you get all these rights of confrontation, right to bail, right? I mean, those things apply in a criminal case. This is not a criminal case. It should be a criminal case.
Breaking news, by the way, Roger Stone convicted in federal case of a statement of Congress relating to Wiki.
I hope to God some of that becomes part of the articles of impeachment, because apparently what I understand the testimony is that the president lied, surprise, surprise, on his interrogatory answers because Stone, or the other witnesses at least, upon which the conviction appears to be based, said that Stone and the president had conversations about WikiLeaks, about the dumps, about the timing. Right. So I hope that this also becomes part of those articles of impeachment for the obstruction.
The Mueller report becomes more interesting.
No, and now comes one other question, again, from a criminal background. This man's now been convicted of a federal felony, right? He's in his 60s, if I'm not mistaken.
68, 69.
Okay, so he's almost my age. That means he's going to spend some time in the can unless he decides he wants to cooperate. Now,
or he gets pardoned.
It's a federal case, isn't it?
It's a federal case.
Case.
Right. Which would be beyond Trump.
Nothing would be beyond Trump, but the point is,
that's an obstruction of justice charge. I'm sorry.
Let's see what he does, because all these guys talk big. They all talk big. Michael Cohen, I'll never roll over, really, until you start looking at 60 months.
Speaking of rolling, this is Rudy Giuliani. Listen to this, okay? Because there's been some people suggesting that they're trying to set Rudy up to be the fall guy, somebody other than Trump. Rudy Giuliani was interviewed by the Guardian the other day, and it was a phone interview.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, "Hey, are you worried that Trump might throw you under the bus in the impeachment crisis?" Giuliani said with a laugh, quote, "I'm not, but I do have very, very good insurance. So if he does, all my hospital bills will be paid." Giuliani's lawyer immediately, who's on the call as well, goes, "He's joking." I mean, this sounds like Goodfellas. And I got insurance. He's not going to throw me under the bus. I got insurance, which means I got too much knowledge.
Right.
I've got too much dirt.
That's what I think.
How do we get Giuliani on the stand in this impeachment inquiry? How do we get Mulvaney on the stand? They're already ignoring subpoenas. How do we get around that? Is it possible?
I would think be compelled by a court.
But there's only two choices. And in this instance, I happen to agree with what the Democrats are doing. If you take it to court, they can appeal and appeal and appeal, and his term will be up by the time the Supreme Court hears the case. There's nothing that's guaranteed. I would say, and I've discussed this with a couple of our federal judges, by the way, if it were brought here in the Eastern District, it being so pressing, they'd get an opinion out in 3 days. They'd have a hearing. You'd say what you have to say. They'd get their briefs, and they'd get an opinion out. But I think they're better off just going with what they got.
Yeah,
these people that are bringing in, if you can't see the forest for the trees, it's almost better in a sense, because these are people nobody's ever heard of. Nobody ever heard of Ambassador Taylor. People in the government did, and if you read about him a little bit, nobody ever heard of Ambassador Yovanovitch because they're working in the public sector.
They're the heroes.
And just to add to that, in the civil arena, if there's evidence that I have, or if there's evidence that I'm denying the other side that is relevant, should be produced, there is an adverse presumption that had I produced it, it would be adverse to my client. And I think so what the Democrats are going to do is use an adverse presumption. You prohibited us from having Mulvaney testify, from having other administration officials testify, and so we're going to assume that had they testified, they would testify against you, and that's the completely appropriate thing to do.
And Schiff said that today in his opening remarks. See, they were concise. I was actually kind of impressed. He's not the most daring type of lawyer. I mean, he could put an orgy to sleep. But I liked what he said, and he said exactly that. He said it's not like we haven't tried. The Republicans are saying we're not getting all the information. We're not getting firsthand. Every time we want to bring someone in here, the guy doesn't come.
Right.
But look how they've come. Taylor came. Kent came,
Vidman.
Yovanovitch came, Vidman came, and the person's coming from the OMB, from the Office of Management and the Budget. And if I were those guys, I'd be really worried about what that person's going to say, because that might be a person who can say, yeah, we were told directly. I mean, we don't know, but he might. And then you don't need Giuliani and Mulvaney. They're completely full of shit anyway. Giuliani doesn't know what he's going to say from 1 minute to the next.
That's kind of why I want to watch it, though.
It would be theater,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't advance the ball any, because you've seen the interviews, the one with Chris Cuomo.
Yeah.
No. Yes.
Yeah.
In 12 seconds.
Well, but I think the thought of him actually saying these things under oath, be really interested to see how his tenor changes. It might not, and maybe he just perjures himself in the first 5 seconds he's up there. You have no idea, but it'd be really interesting to watch.
I think it would all hinge on, I think he's sharper, well, I don't know about sharper. He's got more of a sense than Trump would. If he got a good lawyer and he listened to him or her, then the odds are he would temper some of his ridiculous statements, because he certainly knows, he was the United States attorney, that when you put your hand up in the air, you're subjected to certain criminal charges if you lie. I mean, so.
Well, I want to remind folks, this is the week that was on Deadline Detroit. I'm Craig. Joel Sklar is with me.
Nope.
Steve Fishman is here. Alan Langle once again.
Hey.
I want to move on to something else that sort of broke this week, and that's Stephen Miller, who, of course, is the architect of the immigration policy in the Trump White House. Somebody who has been at the forefront of all of this, the guy advocating for, family separation, talking about the wall. Well, Breitbart, a former reporter at Breitbart, shared about a whole bunch of emails from Stephen Miller to this Ms. McHugh was her name, sending her emails saying, you should run these articles from a bunch of white nationalist sites, places like VDare and Daily Stormer, and places like this.
Daily Stormer.
Daily
That's a
Stormer.
Nice, need you say more.
Stephen Miller, who, by the way, is Jewish, who's trolling around on these white nationalist sites trying to get Breitbart to publish these, to put these ideas into the mainstream, right? This is the Overton window thing. Put it in the mainstream so people start gravitating towards that position, which is really, really scary if you think about it. First of all, what kind of a self-loathing cretin is this guy? If you're willing, as a Jewish man, to be trolling around with white nationalists, I mean, come on now. I don't think they necessarily like Jewish people a whole lot based on the history. The other thing, too, is that the White House's response to this is what really sort of triggered me a little bit yesterday. Yes, I did use the word triggered. I have not bought the book yet. I don't think I'm going to. Donald Trump's buying up all the copies, by the way.
Was this Stephanie
as is the
Grisham?
RNC. I didn't even get into that.
Really?
RNC's been buying up
Lord.
Donald Jr.'s book. So anyway, their response to this was basically saying that the Southern Poverty Law Center is a corrupt organization, blah, blah, blah. And then on background, they said, this attack against Stephen Miller is clearly a form of anti-Semitism to levy these attacks against a Jewish staffer.
Oh, my God. That's a Shonda.
Let Langle respond first, since he has a little more closer relationship with the Holocaust than we do.
That is so absurd. I mean, it should be the opposite. I mean, it's so it's traitorous, really, for somebody Jewish to be peddling that type of stuff, and regardless of what your religion is, but particularly if you're of a minority, for you to peddle that type of stuff is really just, as we say in Yiddish, a shanda.
It's a shanda.
Yeah. But isn't it the same thing as you're the puppet? You're the puppet. Isn't this the Trump? I'm in 4th grade and I'm just going to hurl at you what you hurl at me. Isn't that exactly what's going on? I mean, clearly, promoting white nationalist sites is further anti-Semitism. It's a danger to all of us, quite frankly. And simply to scream out, "No, you're the anti-Semite," doesn't do much. But it's the Trumpian response to every allegation.
That takes some serious guts to put out a response like that. We're going to defend our racist by saying, well, you're anti-Semitic.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, you are.
Well,
but the fact is, there are a number of people who are now saying this guy's got to leave the White House. How can they keep this guy on? How can they keep this guy on? What does it say?
Here's my opinion. Why? Because he goes on television and he does what Trump sits there staring at the television because he can't read, so he doesn't read a book or newspaper or anything. He watches the television. This guy goes on, agitates. He gets cut off by people on Fox News even, but that's what he likes. That's the thing.
We are numb to what this administration has done, and the more that's done after a while.
That's the problem.
After
Joel's
a while,
100% right. What Joel said is 100% right. It's fourth grade behavior, and it's the behavior
dumbing down
that comes from the criminal mind.
It does, and it's so disturbing. I mean, that's what scares the hell out of me.
What scares the hell out of me is that so many people are still supporting him. I get in debates on Facebook with some retired FBI agents.
I've been reading that stuff, by the way, Alan.
Like
this guy
defending him and saying second and third hand information, and this is all BS. And I'm gonna, the biggest thing they'll say is, okay, Trump's not perfect, but I'm gonna vote for him again. And that is disgraceful. And I say, so you are okay with him being a bigot and a racist and being dishonest and being a serial liar? They're like, they don't care.
But that goes beyond reason.
The standard of what a president should be, he is changing everything. I think this election really is about the Constitution. It's really about the presidency. What do we want the presidency to be?
Michelle Goldberg, I think, had an article or opinion in the New York Times today, which talked about that we're becoming so immune to this and inert to this, right? So no matter how great the insult is to the Constitution, to the country, it just doesn't matter anymore. People are weathered, they're tired. And I think she had a great point. And that's what scares me, is that there's a large segment of the population, maybe low information voters, aren't going to change anything. And the Republicans are going to continue to repeat these lies, misrepresent facts, omit facts altogether. And I don't know if anything will change other than there'll be a greater divide between maybe the 30%, 35%, and the 65% who think this is just absurd. We got to move on from this. On the other hand,
if you want to be optimistic, Matt Bevin is no longer the governor of Kentucky.
Yeah, well, he did. He did concede yesterday.
And in all honesty, that's a state that Trump won by 30%, okay? And this guy lost. Now, it's obvious he's a world-class asshole, okay? But people in Kentucky it's as red a state as there is. So this guy might be, I'm hoping, there's a lot of demagogues out there, a lot of people have demagogic qualities, but he might be a unique situation in that for whatever reason, and I agree with Alan, he's kind of a genius at it. It's an evil genius, but he's kind of a genius at connecting with people and all of their worst fears and the things that they really are petrified of. But I'm not so sure there's anybody else that could do it quite like that.
I don't think there is.
And we'll see again in 2020, assuming we can find a decent candidate. We're not going to get into that now, but we'll see in the side elections.
Deval Patrick just jumped in yesterday.
No, but I mean, you saw Virginia. You saw what happened in Virginia. And now it's a blue state. They control the whole state legislature. If that kind of stuff happens, then maybe we will somehow.
Well, tip the scales.
Well, let's move on from this because there's going to be a lot more to discuss next week, obviously, on this as well. But this is something that I wanted to talk about today since I've got a couple of lawyers here. The Browns-Steelers game last night. I don't know if anybody got a chance to watch this game.
I did.
Myles Garrett, who, of course, is a defensive player for the Browns, ripped the helmet off of Mason Patrick, who's the quarterback for the Steelers. Mason Rudolph, excuse me. And took the helmet and hit him in the skull with a helmet.
Yeah.
Again, he's going to be suspended for who knows how long. He might be kicked out of the league. But could he be charged criminally?
Technically, felonious assault in the state of Michigan, it's simple. Assault with somebody with a weapon. A helmet swung the way he swung it. I didn't see the game.
We've seen hockey players been charged.
Yeah,
hockey players have been charged criminally.
Todd Bertuzzi.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
But
I saw that in real time. It was crazy.
I'll tell you what, I didn't see the game. I only saw it this morning in the Washington Post.
Crazy.
But the thing that was gratifying, almost all the players, including his own quarterback, Baker Mayfield, right after the game, I saw his interview with the lady on the sideline. All of them said it was completely out of control. It was completely off the charts. There were people chiming in on these, I guess those are tweets, I think, that they were printing in the paper.
Yeah.
Where there were former players saying he should be suspended for life.
Yeah.
I mean, so ball players.
I mean, his own team didn't even have his back. They're like, yeah, that was bad.
And to his credit, he said the same thing. I mean, he said he didn't. He tried to make some excuse, a little bit of an excuse, but he said himself, it was
I lost
crazy.
control.
I lost control. And, we've discussed this stuff about athletes before. There are unwritten rules with athletes. You can try to kill each other on a football field or in a basketball court, but you don't do it after the fact, and you don't do it with a weapon in your hand, and you don't do it on national television. By the by,
Right.
And I was impressed by the fact that so many of the ball players, because I don't really care what all the do-gooders say. But when players say it, that tells you it's beyond pale.
I have a little question. The Attorney General's office raided the police headquarters for the IT to collect stuff on the mayor's office, on emails and stuff like that. And the question I would have is how much exposure do they have for destroying emails criminally for Alexis Wiley You know, is that?
That's the weird thing that I understand about FOIA law. Until there's a FOIA request for those records, they can be destroyed. If there's a FOIA that's outstanding and you do it after that comes out, that becomes a real problem. Now, it's not a good idea anyway. I mean, you should preserve all records of these sorts of things. If you don't want something to be in an email, don't talk about it over email.
Right.
I mean, but that's my understanding. I could be wrong about that.
I can tell you from a criminal perspective, the crime would have to be, I mean, I don't know about a separate crime. I don't know anything about whether you destroy FOIA stuff. It's probably a misdemeanor of some sort. But it would have to be obstruction of justice.
Yeah.
And it'd be almost impossible, in my view, for them to say that here, because there's really, it's a newspaper article and there's conversation about stuff, but there was no indication, for instance, that the police were investigating it or the U.S. Attorney's Office was, or even Dana was investigating it. You destroy them, you destroy them. I can't see that as a criminal
that's
case.
interesting.
Yeah,
I can see it like you guys say. It's bad politically. It doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good at all.
But you can't jump into crimes. A lot of people always want to make everything into a crime. It's not so simple.
Right.
Well, okay, I've got a couple more stories I need to get to. We've only got a couple minutes left here, but I definitely want to get into this one. Get your guys' opinion on this. Wayne County yesterday announced that they're bringing in Neighborhood Defender Service, which is a not-for-profit firm in New York, to help them with indigent defense here in the community. This seems like a pretty good idea, something that they need help with, because I've heard horror stories about court-appointed attorneys, and there's these caseloads that some of these guys have are just massive, and they can't necessarily give the type of representation that everybody deserves.
No, it's significant.
It's a two-tiered system for sure.
And I see it all the time. I mean, I tell you, I do a lot of the Section 83 work, which is to vindicate constitutional rights, and the cases that I will do are sometimes where someone is wrongly arrested, they never should have been stopped, evidence is illegally seized, and unless they could really retain a lawyer to do the motions to suppress and to give a lot of time to the case, these kids are going to go to jail. They're not going to have someone who is so invested in the case, who's being paid enough money to really look into the case. Oftentimes, and appointed counsel are fine. It's just that there may not be enough economic inducement to do all the work you got to do. They may be overworked. But I will tell you that in my practice, I see that constantly, where the private attorney, they get paid, they do a hell of a good job, and it gives rise to a civil case, which helps us regulate police misconduct, because the evidence gets kicked, and then there's a civil case that follows that.
Let me make two statements so we know where I'm coming from. Number one, I worked in the defender's office when I left law school, and all of us were good lawyers. We all worked our butt off.
Yeah.
We got paid nothing,
Yep.
but we worked hard, and I think that most assigned counsel, particularly in the defender offices, feel that way. They get a salary and they work their ass off. Mm-hmm. Second thing, I'm on the board of the NDS, and I think they're going to do a terrific job. I think there's going to be some interesting things in terms of the caseloads, not of the individual lawyers, but the judges in state court in particular are very, very concerned about what the state court administrative office is going to do. And all the state court administrator's office cares about is whether or not they're running through their docket quickly enough. And there's going to be press back. There's going to be kickback between the lawyers trying to do the things that Joel's talking about.
Right.
And if you want to know a precursor to this, just look at how the State Appellate Defender Office has been treated in general by trial judges. They hate to see them coming because, oh, shit, we got to work. It'll delay the case, this, that, and the other. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
But I think the totality of it, it'll be a much better system.
Well,
hopefully.
I'm going to be talking about this, I believe, on Tuesday of next week for the podcast. I've got working on Warren Evans right now and somebody from NDS to come on and talk about their collaboration on this one. So that'll be kind of fun. Looking forward to it.
I was told there's a lot of people that go to jail that ought not to. Because they don't have the proper representation, and it's tragic.
But in fairness, that can happen when they got a paid lawyer too.
No, that's also true. No question about it.
That's not something that's unique.
You're correct.
To
okay,
I don't know about the local defender's office, but I know the federal defender's office has some great.
They're
attorneys.
excellent. The local defender office had good, but remember, they're going to have the percentage of cases that the defender office gets. The defender office lawyers, back from when I was there in 73 to 76 up to now, they work hard, they do a fine job, but there are a lot of cases that get assigned to private lawyers.
Correct.
And not all of them are going to treat them quite the way you do when you're in a defender's office.
I've got two stories left here. Now, this one does not take place in Detroit or Michigan or Washington, D.C. This one is in Indiana. I just heard about this on NPR the other day, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. But the story involves 3 judges, a White Castle, a strip club, a shooting, and put it this way, alcohol was involved. 3 judges are at a judicial conference in Indianapolis, and they got into a fight. They tried to go to a strip club at 3 a.m. So it's 2 male judges and a female judge. And they're all together, out partying, having fun at this conference. They try to go to a strip club at 3 a.m. It's closed, so they decide to go to White Castle. As they're walking over to White Castle, some guy whistles something out of the car. This woman, the judge, her name was Sabrina Bell, flips off the driver. The drivers stop. Some sort of fight ensues. The 2 male judges get shot.
Wow.
They both survived. Wow. So not a tragic ending. And she
because
was
they
like,
survived? Or
no,
it's a little joke.
but I'm just saying, judges are supposed to be, sort of, they're held in higher esteem than regular citizens. At least they're supposed to be. But
they're supposed to be.
The story, it had all the elements of a stoner comedy. I mean, it was just, it was ridiculous.
I happened to read the article in the Post the day after it happened. I had to read it 3 times because I honestly, I don't know what a stoner comedy is, but Cheech and Chong is what came to mind.
But there's also Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Anyway, I've been to some judicial conferences. I've never seen anybody get into a fight at White Castle. I never saw any judges get shot. But I've definitely seen a few people that had too much to drink at conferences. And it's not just at judges' conferences. It's at doctors' conferences,
It's
lawyers' conferences,
absolutely.
and ditch diggers' conferences. You go away, you start having a little fun, and then one thing leads to the next, and you wind up
Judges are
wrestling
just
around with the
like
guy.
us. They're just people.
They're just regular people.
And, they make mistakes. They make some bad decisions. This is just, that's crazy.
Yeah,
no one would believe. It's stranger than truth.
Exactly.
If you put that on a TV show,
nobody buy it.
They'd say, "What are you kidding?" The producer would say to the writer, "We're not
3
putting
judges?
that on there."
Strip club, 3 o'clock, White Castle, alcohol shooting, really? Honestly? This is what you want me to sell? Yeah, I agree with you.
I just thought it was just one of those weird stories you see every once in a while that had to get out there. Now, one more story, and this is my good news story of the week. An announcement was made yesterday by the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. This is an organization I've done some work for in the past and absolutely love. They're going to give a musical instrument to any kid in Detroit that wants to learn how to play. Public school, charter school, private school, doesn't matter. If you're a kid in Detroit, you want to learn to play any age between kindergarten and 12th grade, they're going to give you an instrument. They're working on the financing for the first round of this. They're looking for a project manager. By the way, I would love to work on that, just in case anybody's checking out, because I'm a huge fan of the DSO and have been for a long, long time. This was one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. What a great gesture.
Yeah, I agree.
We have season tickets to the DSO. I share your enthusiasm for it, and I think that who knows? It's like with athletics. Who knows? Maybe out of that group, maybe there's Earl Klugh.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's
the next Jimmy Ruffin. I mean, I know you're a big Motown guy. So
no, but I mean, in all seriousness, a lot of what keeps kids from participating in music is not their lack of musical ability. They don't have any money.
Exactly.
You want to play the saxophone.
And lessons, too. But they're also going to provide lessons and instruction, which is a huge deal. My son plays viola, and he plays in college, and I basically say his participation in an orchestra might have been the most important thing he ever did. He was on a team that way. He was part of a team. He couldn't play sports.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He couldn't play sports, and it made him into a very fine young man. And it's one of those things that more people need to do.
Yeah,
music is huge. Art matters.
One other thing about the thing with the music, if they're going to provide instruction, let me tell you something. If anybody will be able to recognize talent, it's somebody who plays at Detroit Symphony. And if they see a kid who's 9 and they look and they say,
wow,
this guy maybe has a little Earl Klugh in him or something like that.
And music opens up a world.
And then they can help him to do stuff, because then more people will, my God, my kid got a little talent, boom.
But anyway, I wanted to end on a good note.
That is a
Since we've got so many things that are dividing us right now, it's nice to actually have something.
That's a good note.
That's coming up soon, too. Boy, the Lions without Matthew Stafford.
The Lions with Matthew Stafford.
I'm not sure it's
I haven't seen yet, but
he's wonderful.
I watched a little of the game. That kid's got a good arm.
What would you think if the Lions signed Kaepernick? Real fast, last question.
I'd love it.
Anybody have a problem?
I'd love it.
I'd love it too.
No.
Are you kidding?
We need a quarterback.
Yeah.
That kid Driscoll didn't look bad. I don't think they didn't lose the game because of him.
No,
that's
man.
for sure.
No, they're the Lions.
I'd love to see Kaepernick here. That'd be exciting to give us something to look forward to. And
I
bet he's a young 32. I think he's 31, 32, but he hasn't played in years. If he can still throw the ball,
bring him on.
Absolutely.
Right. If you can play, you can play.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we've got to wrap it up here. Thanks to Joel Sklar for being here. I certainly appreciate it once again. Steve Fishman once again. You guys get to be regular fixtures around here, which I appreciate. We're going to need your expertise throughout this whole process. Alan Lengel, always appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks to Michael Lucido for engineering our broadcast today,
Michael
doing a fine
Lucido.
job as always. Also, thanks to Techtown Detroit and Samaritas for sponsoring this show. I really do appreciate that. It helps us do it, which is a big, big deal. And Alan, I'm going to give you the last word.
Drive home safely.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Hey, the Craig Fahle Show on Deadline Detroit is made possible by Samaritas, which is the state's largest private foster care and adoption agency. But they do a heck of a lot more than that. They've been serving homeless families, persons with disabilities, abused and trafficked women. They're also one of the largest resettlement agencies in the state. They provide market rate and affordable housing for seniors and HUD housing for families. And they also have skilled nursing, memory care, and rehab communities in Grand Rapids, Cadillac, and Saginaw. Samaritas, thanks for their support. Great organization, doing great stuff all around the state.